I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway at least?
This is the news.
Schmack-a-ma-gob, it's time for the only news that matters on Black Sabbath Sunday. And Ronnie James Dio was a larger-than-life figure, but he wanted something very simple when it came to his musical career. In 1979, the singer left Rainbow unable to work with an increasingly bossy Ritchie Blackmore, once his equal partner, and sought out a new project. The same year, he met Tony Iommi by chance at the Rainbow in LA. One thing led to another, and Dio ended up replacing Ozzy Osbourne in Black Sabbath. But Sabbath's reputation wasn't the deciding factor for Dio's decision to join Black Sabbath. Dio was sick and tired of arguments with bandmates, and he sought a different peaceful environment. He wanted to work with musicians who'd be equal and supportive. In 1981, a conversation with Radio Trent Nottingham, Dio stated that good relationships in a band were more important to him than music. Says, why the Black Sabbath thing? I wanted to be sure that my next tenure was going to be with people that I liked and people I can get along with on a very equal personal basis. And these happen to be the lot that filled the bill for me. And then, of course, the music was as important, but the most important thing was getting along personally. Dio continued, noting that happiness will always lead to quality music, and expresses gladness at his good fortune with the members of Black Sabbath. He said, "That's the easiest way to create good music, if you're happy. And I'm happy now. I'm just glad it all came about." It did come about, by the way, first by meeting Tony, and then he introduced me to Terry and Bill. From there, it was just a lot of conversations and a little bit of playing, and the decision to carry on with Black Sabbath. And that's what we did. All right, there you go. Wow, did I love that Black Sabbath stuff with Dio. I was lucky enough to see the Heaven and Hell tour, 1980, one of my first shows I ever went to. And I saw the Mob Rules tour, and the Humanizer, and the Dio years, you know. I loved it, man. I mean, Black Sabbath to me is a lot like, how Iron Maiden was. Because you have Paul Di'Anno does the first two albums, and then they get Bruce Dickinson and it becomes a whole different band. It becomes more perfect, more picture perfect, where it was loose with Di'Anno. It had a loose vibe to it. Very tight but loose, where, it wasn't, there's nothing loose about those Dickinson albums, in my opinion. And I feel the same way about the Dio albums. Especially the first two. You have Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, and those two albums, man, it's just perfection. It's just perfect music. Where with Ozzy, boy, it was even looser than early Maiden. Very organic. My favorite band ever, is Black Sabbath with Ozzy. And that's not taking nothing away from Black Sabbath with Dio, because it's one, probably in my top 10, of greatest bands ever. Is probably, I never really thought of that, but now I think about it, Black Sabbath would make my top 10 3 times, because I love the Gillen. And who remembers a couple years back, I believe it was a relative, the son of Jeff Nichols, released a song that Black Sabbath did with Dio called Slapback. And I remember listening to it back then going, boy, this would totally not fit on Heaven and Hell. I don't know about this song. I went and looked for it now while doing this news report, I man, let me listen to that song again. And I'm listening to it, and to me, it kind of sounds like Hard Road from Never Say Die. It really does have, it doesn't sound like Black Sabbath has entered the realm of perfection, Ronnie James Dio style yet. That must have been a very early song, maybe the first song they ever worked on. I don't know. I don't have a timeline. Maybe somebody does and can say, you know, I know Children of the Sea is the first one because, you know, when they first jammed, that was the first song they played. But I wonder if Slapback was after that, you know, because it sure sounds like a band that's trying to find themselves. It's a song that they're searching. You can tell they're searching. It sounds like a track they're just, you know, throwing at a wall and seeing what sticks. It sounds like they're just jamming, trying to work out a song. And they obviously, like, you know, gave it up. And then Jeff Nichols' son or somebody involved in that released it. And I remember Tony Iommi was very displeased with that. He was very upset. And actually listening to it, you know, I can't blame him. I mean, I'm not saying it's horrible. It's all right. Hey, it's historic, you know. It's all right. It's a cool song, you know, in motion. But, you know, this is a guy that, you know, he's the godfather of metal. And this song doesn't really sound, it doesn't sound like there's any growth between Never Say Die and Heaven and Slapback. Where Heaven and Hell, like I said earlier, it's a completely different band. Nothing like the Ozzy stuff. Where Slapback is kind of like the Ozzy stuff. Musically. And also, you know, I mean, it was, I've heard conflicting stories. I heard it was Sharon Osbourne that introduced Tony Iommi to Ronnie James Dio at the Whiskey is one story I heard. And the other story was they met at the Whiskey, but there was no mention of Sharon Osbourne. I don't know. Either way, wow, what a combination. And for those that don't know, Geezer Butler left Black Sabbath, and they got Greg Gruber to play bass on the Heaven and Hell, you know, recording Heaven and Hell. But then what I understand is Geezer Butler ended up hearing what they were doing and said, shit, I want in on this. And according to Greg Gruber, he was the one that came up with that bass line on the song Heaven and Hell. And Geezer kind of like just played what that guy played. But yeah, that was very interesting. I mean, can you imagine if Geezer never came back? It'd be weird. It'd be like Black Sabbath coming back with only 2 original members. It would have been very odd, and I don't know how much that would have flown, but, you know, just want to, you know, and it is hard. Bands don't succeed when they hire different singers. It's very, very rare. You know, Brian Johnson would be one of them. Sammy Hagar Belcher, unfortunately, he's another one. And I know there may be a couple more, but then there's changing singers that the bands fail. And I'm even talking about good albums, like that Motley Crue album with John Corabi. But Dio with Sabbath was just a perfect fit. It was so perfect. You had still the Doom, but it was a different type of Doom. It just sounded like Doom injected with steroids. That's the best way I can describe Sabbath music with Dio. I mean, it's Sabbath on steroids. I don't think Sabbath was on steroids with Ozzy. They were just a badass fucking organic, amazing band. And then they injected steroids into them. And that's Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. I love the Humanizer, but there's something about Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. You know, those 2 albums. They're just perfection, you know? Hard to believe Bill Ward played on Heaven and Hell, because that doesn't sound like him at all. And according to Bill Ward, he doesn't remember recording that album at all. He was so messed up with alcohol at the time. But if you listen to his drumming on Heaven and Hell, everything is in the pocket, right there, you know? Where in Sabbath, it was percussive and all over the place. Very adventurous drumming. That's why, you know, that's the same thing I can say about Maiden. It was much more adventurous with Di'Anno. It was much more adventurous with Ozzy. It was kind of like steering, like putting your foot on the gas without putting your hands on the steering wheel. That's what it's like listening to Sabbath with Ozzy, where with Dio, you do have your hands on the steering wheel and you're crushing everything in your path. There you go. Anyway, what do you all think? Leave it in the comments below. Are you a fan of the Dio stuff more than the Ozzy? Because there's a lot of people out there that prefer the perfection over the organic. I get it, you know? And there is. I've seen even close personal friends of mine think the Dio stuff's the best stuff. And, you know, they don't like the Ozzy stuff as much. And that's cool if you all think that. If you do, leave it in the comments below. But if you think like me and you think Ozzy's better, put it in the comments below. Or Ian Gillan, you know? Whatever, man. I like hearing from you all. Talking about Black Sabbath, my favorite band with Merciful Fate from the 80s. So thank you all for watching The Only News That Matters. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't and ring that little notification bell and like the video. It's good for the YouTube algorithms. So stay frosty. Listen to the song from Sabotage called White Witch and schmack 'em a cob.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston, and so never more shall we see you again.